Hey, everybody. Welcome to Daniel Davis Deep Dive, coming to you live from Washington, D.C. You know, every time we bring a show here, I always say, we got a really good one for you today because we always do. We're not going to put a show up if we don't think it's going to be a really good one. But this one is one that's a little bit special. It's a little different than some of the other ones we've done because instead of just identifying a problem, we're actually identifying a solution here or exposing a solution to a problem that has really existed, something that we've even talked about before. And we have an incredible person that maybe you don't know about. You probably are going to, although he's starting to get a little bit more out there. Dan McKnight, who is a former Marine, a former football coach, and currently is the founder of Bring Our Troops Home, which I have been a huge advocate and supporter of for many years. And you're going to understand why here in just a minute. But Dan, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Thanks, Danny. It sure is good to see you.
And man, I want to make sure people get to know who you are. And man, I hope everybody who's watching this and who watches the tape later on, gets on your team and gets behind this because you guys are doing some really, really good things here. And just kind of as we get started, just so everybody knows here, this is going to be kind of an inaugural episode of something we're going to do, a new segment that we really want to highlight here on this show. And that's that you can make a difference. We're going to call it We the People Getting It Done. And Dan is the epitome of that, which is why we're so grateful to have the opportunity to share with you some actual good news for a change here, and not just to identify a problem. But there has been a problem, and just to give you a little context of this, we have often said that the United States government really quit following the Constitution in terms of the war-making powers a long time ago. The Constitution says it belongs to the United States Congress exclusively, but it has kind of devolved into a plaything of the administrative branch to use however they want to. And there's been all kinds of efforts to try to change that, to try to bring it back into line with the Congress, but it just hasn't gone anywhere. There's just not enough people that want to do the right thing, that want to take away the power because there's so much money to be made, if you just being blunt about it. But Dan, you have a different idea. Before we even talk about some of the things that you've specifically been doing, I wonder if you can tell me a little bit about your organization, Bring Our Troops Home, where it came from, and why you feel so strongly about this.
Absolutely, Danny. Thank you again for having me here. And I'll give you the short version. I served in the military for 13 years, and then I was in Afghanistan from 2005 to 2007. And it was really early in the war, and I was a member of the Idaho National Guard, but we had been attached and activated as part of 82nd Airborne and 10th Mountain Division. And they didn't want us there in Afghanistan. The active duty Army thought the National Guard was not properly trained, not properly equipped, weekend warriors. And they didn't want us there. And so we had a really hard time negotiating the mechanism of big Army. We couldn't get supplies. We had a hard time getting replacement boots, safety equipment, gloves, goggles, body armor. And out of frustration, in about our 8th month in the war that we were there, I had gone through the chain of command trying to get some of my guys' boots to replace just completely worn out boots, and I couldn't do it. And I called a friend back home, and he gave me the number of our governor from Idaho. And so I was deep in the Pesh River Valley in northeastern Afghanistan, and I climbed to the top of a hill where I got a really clear satellite phone signal, and I called that number, and the governor of Idaho, Jim Risch, answered the phone. It was his personal cell phone.
Man,
and I explained to him who I was.
From the Pesh Valley. That's
from
crazy.
The Pesh Valley. Yep. And, I said, Governor Risch, this is Sergeant Dan McKnight. I'm a member of the Idaho Army National Guard. I'm calling you from Afghanistan. I hope I have your attention. And he goes, Dan, you've got it. And I went on to explain the situation that we are National Guardsmen from Idaho, but we'd been activated and we're now in Afghanistan fighting the war. And we were having a hard time getting the supplies. And he had just been appointed governor. He was the lieutenant governor a couple of weeks before that. And then our governor went back to DC. And he said, Dan, I know I'm the commander in chief of the Idaho National Guard. I've only been governor for a minute. I don't know what I can do, but I'm going to do something. And I hung up the satellite phone and I said, you know what, that's kind of the last, there's nothing else to do. And I walked back down to camp. And 48 hours later, I get a message from my battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel. And he says, Sergeant McKnight, I don't know who you called, but there are 2 shipping containers from Idaho on their way here with supplies for our entire battalion. Give me your satellite phone. And so he took away my phone because that's how officers are.
Anybody else?
Yep, exactly. That's how officers are, right? If the idea is not theirs or it's not their superiors, it's not a good idea. No offense, Danny. But I held Jim Risch up on this pedestal as kind of a defender of liberty, a proud American who would support the military. And I was really young in my foreign policy beliefs, and I never really felt comfortable with the war. I never knew what we were doing there. I could never identify a mission. I could never understand what success looked like because it changed every day. It was first we were shock and awe, and then we were hearts and minds, and then we were counterinsurgency, and then we were provincial reconstruction, all in the 18 months while I was there.
Yikes.
And so I came home and I was angry. I was hurt when I got home. I got out of the military and I was mad. And I went underground. I didn't care about politics. The only thing I cared about was my kids and my family. And I started coaching high school football and just trying to bury myself in just being just an average guy. Well, Jim Risch, who was the governor, went on to become Senator Risch. And in 2019, a friend of mine called me and he said, Dan, he goes, the tables are turning. I don't know if you've been watching right now, but we have more leverage now than we've probably ever had in foreign policy. And we used to get together for drinks and talk about how much we were confused by the war. And I asked him what he meant. And he told me about Jim Risch. He was now the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the second or third most powerful man in the country in foreign policy. And he goes, why don't you call Jim back up and see if he'll help us out again? I thought, God, that's a great idea. But how do you call a powerful senator? So I didn't know what to do. So I'm a Marine first, then I was Army. So I got out my box of crayons and I wrote an op-ed and I sent it into the local newspaper asking Senator Risch to demonstrate to the people of Idaho how much he cared about proper foreign policy and following the Constitution and bringing our troops home from these endless wars. Didn't get a response. And so Jim Risch came back to town and put on a fundraising event. And I grabbed my buddy and a camera and I went to the event. And I waited till the end after he'd given his speech where he just talked about all the things that politicians talk about. And I raised my hand and I stood up and my friend started the camera. And,
Oh, man.
and I said, Senator Risch, my name is Dan McKnight. I was a member of the Idaho Army National Guard in Afghanistan. I wrote an op-ed recently. He goes, whoa, Dan, I remember you. I remember the situation. I've read your op-ed. I agree. We're done nation building. We are through. We're going to follow the Constitution. We're going to do it right. And I thought, my God, this is so easy. Why don't people get involved? Turned the camera off and went about our business. And Jim Risch got on a plane and flew back to DC and voted 3 times the next 90 days to extend the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and Yemen indefinitely. And so I thought,
ouch,
we need to do more. And that's when I met you. We decided to put on an event. We started this organization, Bring Our Troops Home. And we said, we're going to get involved. And so we started looking for veterans around the country that believe like we do. And it wasn't hard because most of them that had been there had the same experience.
Exactly my experience as well.
Yep. So we took 100 veterans and state lawmakers from around the country. We put them all on buses and airplanes and we flew them into DC and we put on this, it was pretty robust event where we just talked about foreign policy and had guest speakers. And then we went and met with our members of Congress, 100 of us at a time. And I sat in my senator, again, Risch's office and one of my congressmen, and I couldn't even get them to discuss foreign policy. They couldn't care less. They wanted a picture with me and my veteran friends just put in their newsletter, but they didn't want to do anything to help us.
Yeah.
And then I sat in Liz Cheney's office and we told her the situation. And I didn't know much about Liz Cheney. I knew that she was Evil Dick's daughter, but I didn't know much about her. And we explained the situation and she goes, listen, gentlemen, thanks for coming in. I'd love to get a picture with you before you leave, but we are never leaving Afghanistan as long as I'm in Congress. And we walked out of there and we wiped our hands and we said, we're never coming back to DC again. We're going back to the States where we have better leverage, where we can influence foreign policy a little bit better. And we had to really kind of find a way to do it. And we didn't know how to do it, but I knew I'd rather fight in the legislature of the state than in Washington, DC.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about that. What, I guess, how did it come to your mind to say, okay, well, if the U.S. Congress won't do the right thing, and if we can't get them to do the right thing, let's try to find a different point of entry, a different leverage point for the state legislatures. How did you get to that point?
Serendipity. While we were at that event, I was talking with a friend over drinks after we finished our event. And if you remember, President Erdogan was in town that weekend. Remember how the city was locked down? And so we were at this bar and there was just 4 of us there, 4 people in DC. And we're sitting at the bar talking about nullification and what the states can do to interpose between the citizens and the federal government when they're overreaching. And my friend's name was Pat McGeehan. He's a delegate from the West Virginia legislature. He's an Air Force veteran, graduated from the Air Force Academy.
I think I met him during that conference.
I'm sure you did. And he said, I've been running this bill for 4 or 5 years now called Defend the Guard. And he explained it to me. And this is the way he explained it is the exact same way that I explained today. It's a bill based on the 10th Amendment that says that the states have control of their militia. And the militia can be called into federal service for three purposes. Just so everybody understands, the militia in the Constitution is commonly referred to as the National Guard today. I have some beef with that, but that's for the sake of conversation. The National Guard is the militia. The National Guard can be called into federal service for three purposes and three purposes only: to repel an invasion, to put down an insurrection, and to enforce the laws of the Union. That's it. And so to go to war, there has to be a declaration of war, or the National Guard can't go, because a declaration of war passed by Congress and signed by the president becomes the law of the Union. And so I said, my God, that's brilliant. I know 15 state legislators in my own state. I know one of my congressional delegation, and he's worthless. And so we went home, and I started calling around and talking to legislators, and they're unanimously, they're like, that's a great idea, but it's going to cost us money. The federal government's going to strip money from our National Guard. And at that point, I got so tired of hearing that. I said, you know what? At some point, somebody's going to have to stand up, tell the federal government to keep their damn dollars and quit trying to bribe us with our own tax revenue. And let's do what's right. And in 5 years, Danny, 5 years, we're going to have it submitted in almost 40 states this year. We just passed in the New Hampshire House of Representatives last year. And if one state passes it through both chambers and it gets signed by the governor, the dominoes will fall so fast we won't know what's going on. But it's going to take a bold state like Montana nearly did it last year. New Hampshire just passed the House. Arizona Senate was the first legislative body in the country to pass it unanimously with unanimous Republican support last year, with one of the greatest patriot and veterans I know, Senator Wendy Rogers. She was our sponsor. And it's growing. We've got it on the ballot now in Texas. It's going to be a ballot proposition on March 5th, where voters get to express their support for it. It won't become law if it passes, or if it wins the ballot proposition. It just becomes an official statewide registered voter poll, basically.
Yeah,
we can take that and run it around the country.
Before we get to the New Hampshire part, because I wanted to reel in there, because that I think was a big one. I want to kind of bring our viewers up here along some of the path that got you here. And you were on Tucker Carlson before he left Fox, or last year, I guess it was. And were you starting to get some national momentum?
Yeah, we did. The Defend the Guard bill essentially says that the National Guard cannot be deployed under federal service into foreign combat unless Congress has first done their job and declared war. That's something Congress hasn't done in 80 years. And we found ourselves in a state of perpetual and endless war ever since World War II. It's time for Congress to kind of reclaim their authority under the Constitution. That's our authority that we've given to Congress, and properly declare war. If it's important enough for us to send the lives of Americans and the treasure of American taxpayers into a foreign land for combat, then Congress should do the right thing, and they should debate it and declare it and put their name on the line before our soldiers ever put their boots on the ground.
And, look, that's so logical, it's so rational. It's hard for me to understand how that, that doesn't get more and more obvious support. Now, I guess I shouldn't say I can't understand, because I can understand, because money's involved, and big people personalities are involved. That certainly is going to get in the way. But despite all of those obstacles, the issue with New Hampshire did come up, and you did pass that legislature. And I think that was a really big one. Gary, if you can throw that headline up there that we had on this on the New Hampshire part, I thought that was so important. Because that's something you've been fighting for a long time. And that also got the attention of Fox and Friends, which is, of course, one of the bigger shows, especially in the morning, that so many people watch. And man, did you get some excitement on that show.
We sure did.
The New Hampshire State House has passed a bill that would require the United States Congress to declare war before deploying the New Hampshire National Guard. Quote from the bill real quick reads as follows. Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution vests the Congress with the exclusive power to declare war, and by abdicating the war powers to the executive branch, the United States Congress has failed to follow the United States Constitution and the intent of the founders, Pete.
This caught my eye. It's a really interesting development. Right now, this is New Hampshire only. And New Hampshire is simply pointing out that it's supposed to be Congress that declares war. It has become an executive branch function. And as a result, unless the Congress declares war, New Hampshire doesn't have to send troops for foreign wars.
You know, that is, I mean, of course, I'm right there with them. I'm just as excited. And I bet our viewers are here going, wait, you mean people can actually have a chance to do something? We can actually tell the government to shut up and stop doing things we don't want them to. And man, that is starting to happen. And I'm so hopeful that you're right, that dominoes could start falling, especially once you get two chambers in one state. And I'm sorry, which did you say is the first up in that possibility? Is it Arizona?
Oh, well, New Hampshire, it'll be in the coming weeks.
Okay.
It'll
So
go to the
that's
Senate.
The first
Yep.
one up there.
Mhm.
And what do you think the prospects are of passing the House, and then of that going to the governor and him signing it? Or is
Well,
that how that's to work there?
I'll tell you, when the universe lines things up for you, you have to recognize, and if you don't, you're going to miss the true beauty in things. There's a bigger event happening in New Hampshire here in just a couple weeks, presidential primary. And with this bill passing right now and the timing of it, it becomes an issue that every candidate is going to have to answer to. We've already reached out to every campaign that's still alive. We've sent formal letters to their campaign offices asking them for their comment on war powers specifically. Do you believe in the pure, clear, and concise language of the Constitution that Congress has the authority to declare war and nobody else? And they're going to have to address it. We are pushing this from the states onto the national stage. So while the circus is going on in New Hampshire, the Senate will be taking up the business of the people. And if it passes the Senate, it will land on Governor Sununu's desk. And if you know anything about New Hampshire politics and Governor Sununu, you know he is Nikki Haley's right-hand man. He is lobbying for a vice presidential position right now. Do you think Nimrata Haley is going to allow Governor Sununu to sign this bill? Probably not. Nimrata loves war. She absolutely loves war. And
we talked about that on the show. Yeah.
Yep. So we're gonna have a fight on our hands, and I'll tell you that some people get really discouraged by defeat, especially in politics. For me, when you lose, you actually win more than when you win, because when you lose, you identify targets. And as a former tank commander, you know what happens when you have targets: load and shoot, right? Load and shoot, rinse, repeat, do it again. And so every time we have a vote and we find people that are strongly opposed to our legislation, they right into our crosshairs. And we spent days, months, resources, miles on boots in Wyoming to defeat Liz Cheney. We went to county GOP meetings. We helped sponsor resolutions of censure. We did everything we could to get rid of that evil woman. And look what happens when all you do is start momentum. Momentum's a funny thing, right? You get the ball moving.
Speaking of momentum, though, won't the governor, won't he have some problems of his own? Yeah, he may want to, trying to position himself up to get something in the next administration should Haley win. That's one thing. But if the House and the Senate both say that, ergo the people of the state say, this is what we want. I don't want my son going off to a war. I don't want my daughter being sent into a combat zone because somebody in Washington wants it, when it's not something that the Congress has done. It didn't follow the Constitution, and the people don't want it. Doesn't he come under pressure to submit to the will of the people, or can he just flout it?
The submitting to the will of the people is the way of our constitutional republic is supposed to work. It doesn't always work, because we know that it's not necessarily the will of the people that rules the day. It's the will of the administrative class and the way things work. Let me tell you what happens every time we show up to testify on this bill in state legislatures. Myself or some of the other folks, if you want to throw that picture up from New Hampshire, the guy in the front row and with the long sleeve shirt and that really great looking beard. Guys like this show up to testify on behalf of the bill, because these are the brothers and sisters that pay the price with blood. They show up to testify looking like average, everyday Americans, and sitting in the chair next to them to testify against the bill is generally a 1- or 2-star general with a chest full of ribbons and medals, telling the state legislature they can't pass this bill because it will cost the state millions of dollars of federal funds to fund the National Guard. I'm sorry, General, you don't set the budget. The purse strings are controlled by Congress also. So we went to Congress and found some favorable champions. We found Paul Gosar, congressman out of Arizona, and he wrote us an op-ed that said, I sit on appropriations. If a state raises their hand and reclaims their authority over their people and their militia, as a member of appropriations, I promise they will not lose $1 in the funding for their National Guard, because we're obligated by the Constitution to fund and equip the militia. We win if you read the words. And that's all we need people to do is just to basic high school civics class, and this bill makes sense.
So you said that how many state legislatures will take this up at some point during 24?
We've got almost 40 state sponsors. That's a legislator or a senator in a state that's going to sponsor the bill this year.
So now, how did you get that? How do you have that kind of reach that you're reaching out to people in these different states, or are they seeking you out?
A little column A, a little column B. But I'll tell you, I have a secret weapon that most people don't have. My director of field operations, Diego Rivera, and I think we've got a picture of Diego and my communications director, Hunter. That right there, man, those two guys, not only do they make me look incredibly handsome, but those two guys are warriors. Hunter is with his communications, he's crisp, he's sharp, he stays on point. He keeps us from wandering off into issues that mean something to us personally, but have nothing to do with our organization. And then Diego, nobody knows how to beat the street like Diego. Diego organizes door knocking campaigns, literature drops, phone banking, and he recruits legislators like he's collecting baseball cards. He will just pick up the phone and start calling guys. Wow. He'll follow them on social media. If he sees a post that shows a little bit of liberty, he becomes their friend, and we call him. We get him on a recruiting call. We pitch them. We've got a beautiful legislative packet that we built. We write the bill for them. We help get it put in the right code in their state. We write their speeches. We write their press releases. All they have to do is stand up and make a motion on the floor. I can't do that myself. Yeah. I'll do everything else for them. And so legislators like it when somebody does their work for them, and we just simply do their work for them. And then we do a brilliant job of a 5-column analysis. When we know what committee it's going to, we analyze the voting record of every member of that committee. We figure out who's a supporter. We get them on as co-sponsors, and then we start working the phones. And we have a phone bank almost every day of volunteers from around the country, from great organizations like the Mises Caucus of the Libertarian Party. We've got the Republican Liberty Caucus members, and they will join us on phone banking efforts, and we will just start calling into state legislatures until the phone lines melt. And we make it hurt.
So, what can some of our folks do? People who are watching this, if they want to get involved in this, if they want to say, hey, I want to be a part of something that's actually bringing the government into conformity with the will of the people, what can they do?
Couple things. If you go to bringourtroopshome.us, you see it here. You can sign up just to get our newsletter. That would be the first thing you do. And we send out 1 or 2 newsletters a week. And sometimes you get a video from me if you don't mind looking at me. My wife doesn't. Or you can go to defendtheguard.us/phone bank. You can sign up there to work with Diego directly. And he trains you. Takes about 10 minutes to train you on how to do it. He doesn't tell you what to say. He just gives you the high level 30,000 foot view. And then we just have veterans just call. You just call and you call and you call. You call every member of the committee once on Monday, maybe once on Tuesday. And after a week or so, we've put 10,000 phone calls into the State House. People start to notice. And then we have a petition drive. When we have a bill that's ready to go hot in the state, we will launch a petition online, and we will deliver all those petition signatures with the name and the address showing the legislators, these are people from your district. And then we have volunteers that beat the street and drop literature. If we find someone that's opposed to the bill, we're going to let his neighbors know. We're going to let his district know. We might even let his mom know. We might go into his church. We're going to make it hurt. Being wrong should hurt. And our society's gotten away from that. We coddle everybody. Everybody gets a trophy. But when you do something wrong, it should hurt.
You know, Dan, I think this is so much more important than a lot of people realize. I mean, I've been highlighting the part about it's great for the people to be involved in making the government actually work for them, as opposed to be the other way around or just being ignored like so happens. But, this has, I think, an additional potential benefit to the country outside of this really big one here, is that you have so many people. We've had on a couple of the last few days where there's some big mouth talkers in Washington, D.C. that are almost aching to get us into another war. They want to go into Iran. They want to hit Hezbollah. Some of them even want to get involved in the Russia-Ukraine war a little bit more. Definitely trying to get us, more active, involved in a potential flash over China and Taiwan that are just antithetical to our needs at all. They don't even think about the Constitution. That's no longer even a concern of theirs. Now, if all of a sudden they lose entire states out of the potential National Guard that could, support some of these absurd wars. Like if we get into another war in the Middle East in Iran, I can assure you the National Guard will be heavily called upon, because we don't have enough regular active forces to be able to do that. if they can't use them unless there's a declared war, i.e. they follow the Constitution, then all of a sudden they're going to have to be going, okay, hang on. We can't go into this war because we don't have enough support to go into it. So that could actually improve our foreign policy and lessen the chance that we get into a war. That's why I'm so excited about this.
Absolutely. You take away over 50% of the military's total fighting force by eliminating the National Guard, 50%. And we're already in recruiting problems nationwide for all branches of the military because they're too busy focusing on Lloyd Austin's pet projects, right? They're too worried about putting purple-haired trans into the military. Look, the military is designed to do one thing: defend America. We're not overseas looking for adventures. We're not looking for dragons to slay. And if we do need to go to a war, and look, I am as anti-war as anybody, but I'm not an anti-war guy. Like, right. I don't live my life to be anti-war.
Absolutely.
If there is a war, exactly. If there's a reason to go to war, it should be discussed and debated, and we should understand it. And our leaders, our elected leaders, should know the issue. You ask any member of Congress where the Donbass region is. They couldn't find it on a map if you gave them 15 tries.
But they'll sure send some money out there. But here's what they are doing. I got to show this because here's one of those elected senators who's not quite following the Constitution.
Without Iran, there are no Houthis. The Houthis are completely backed by Iran. I've been saying for 6 months now, hit Iran. They have oil fields out in the open. They have the Revolutionary Guard headquarters you can see from space. Blow it off the map.
Yeah, man, just blow it off the map. Don't worry about telling the American people why it's, potentially going to suck us into a war. Don't worry about saying how it's even in our national interest to go and blow them off the map or whether we're threatened by them. Don't worry about that. Blow them off the map and then we'll figure it out from there. I mean, that's how foreign policy is done.
That Southern Belle has such a distinct, strong jawline that I want to follow him into combat, right? I would follow Lindsey Graham, the Southern Belle, anywhere. That man is a dumpster fire. I don't understand how you can get so far off the Constitution and remain in office. The people of South Carolina must have no clue, I guess. I don't understand, but he is terrible. There's never been a war he didn't want to fight, but he won't fight him himself. He wore the military, but he was a JAG officer. He's never seen combat. And I'm guessing his children may not even serve either. I don't know.
Yeah. And then of course he's just one. I mean, I could throw a bunch of them up there. I could put Petraeus. I could put General Ben Hodges, any number of others that just are always lobbing for, more military. And, obviously a part of this is also the military industrial complex and the financial racket. And that's why so many people support this stuff. And, when we had that, there was a Quinnipiac poll up the other day where it said, are you worried for the American people? Are you concerned about the possibility of a war breaking out in the Middle East? And 84% of the American people said, yeah, I'm worried about that. But then you have almost the inverse in Congress where there's 84% that are hoping that you get something like that because they want to show how tough we are. And something like this, bring the troops home, because by the way, we're also big advocates of bringing the troops home from Iraq, from Syria especially. So that's still out there. We beat those drums all the time, but prevent us from getting into new stupid ones. And the stuff that you're doing is such an important part of that could actually do something. Whereas all these other stuff, people, frankly, even like we talk about it all the time, but you're actually doing something about it, which is why we admire you so much.
Well, thank you so much. There's a great example of what you were just talking about of these stupid wars where Katie Hobbs, who's the governor of Arizona, last spring, when we were passing Defend the Guard in their Senate, she got on a plane and flew halfway around the world. And she went to Oman and signed a state partnership agreement between the Arizona National Guard and the Sultan of Oman to provide military aid, training, and common defense for the Oman border between Oman and Yemen. Turn around to last month, Katie Hobbs, as governor of Arizona, sends the National Guard to the southern border of the United States to defend our border, only to find out that they're not down there with any long rifles pointed to the south, right? There's no combat engineers stretching out concertina wire. There's no drones flying up and down the border. The National Guard's down there as uniformed paper pushers, expediting the processing of illegal aliens crossing the border. So she's willing to send the National Guard, the men and women of Arizona, teachers, tradesmen, police officers, to Oman to defend the Yemeni border, but she's not willing to do the same thing 50 miles to the south. It's insane.
Yeah, I don't understand. Well, okay, I say that I do understand why a lot of that stuff is done. It seems to always circle back to money and prestige. But the American people, they just don't. They're not buying it. They don't want that kind of thing. They want to see that stuff curtailed. If anything, they want to see our borders defended, and they want to see us taking care of that issue instead of continuing to send all this money elsewhere. And we can certainly talk about that separately. But what they don't want to do is to just continually send them off somewhere else to fight somebody else's war, do somebody else's dirty business. And I'm really tired of it.
Yep. The National Guard is our constitutional mechanism of defense. That's what they're for. They should be here defending the homeland, putting down insurrections, repelling invasions, and enforcing the laws of the Union. And again, we're not anti-war in the sense of being completely against war. Just like Ron Paul, who was the greatest probably anti-war congressman in the last 50 years, he understood the necessity of war. He was the only member of Congress to submit a declaration of war before Iraq. He said, if we're going to go to Iraq and it's so important, we're going to do a declaration of war and I'm going to sponsor it. He said, I won't vote for it, but I'm going to sponsor it. It was dead on arrival. It never even got out of a committee. It was dead. But he wanted to demonstrate that Washington, D.C. has no interest in doing their job.
Yeah, and really, it gets down to that, and this is unfortunately in a number of different ways this applies, but we've gotten so far away from actually following the Constitution. So many people love to wave it around and talk about it, but then they don't actually read it or they don't want to follow it. And I guess that's also a separate issue. But in the last few minutes we have here, Dan, tell us what's next. What's next on your calendar, or what's in your target array? What's the next ones you want to shoot for, and where do you think this is going?
Yep. We've got a brand new sponsor in Georgia that we're really excited about, Colton Moore. He's a young legislator down there. He's great. State of Florida is our bill sponsor down there, is taking the bill around to all of the county GOP chair meetings and getting resolutions passed at the county level. We've got Defend the Guard is now an official Republican plank issue in Texas. It's on the party platform that the Republicans in the state of Texas should honor the Defend the Guard. So we've got those states. We've got Arizona that's coming up again. We've got a major conference that we're putting on in Arizona on the 9th. We haven't even announced it yet. In fact, I'm announcing it here first. You get the scoop. It's a foreign policy conference on the 9th, right after the primary in Texas. We're going to have any remaining presidential candidates will be invited to this conference, but we're going to be there with the Arizona congressional delegation, who most of them are true champions of liberty and understand the Constitution. All of our bill sponsors from Arizona will be there, and we're bringing in veterans again to attend this conference. And we will have a presidential candidate there, and more on that as we get it firmed up.
Cool. Yeah, can't wait to hear about that. That sounds awesome.
Yep.
Well, you definitely have a big supporter here. We'll be talking about this, and man, maybe we can have you back on again when more of those details are ready to be publicized, especially as it gets closer to the event. We'd love to give some amplification of that, because we're big supporters of what you're doing.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it, man. We're a big fan of the show. I'm glad you've got this this platform. I really, really enjoy the content because it's so well thought out. And when it comes from somebody that had such a heavy piece of metal on your collar when you were serving, it has a little more gravitas. I think that we have, as veterans, real potential energy. Potential energy is energy that's built up into something next to something that doesn't have it, right? And as veterans, we have this potential energy because we put the uniform on.
Yeah.
We promised our lives to defend the Constitution. It means something to us. And if we would ever unify our voices, I think we'd be the most powerful political force in the country.
I think we can, and we'll look forward to seeing that continue to happen. So thanks ever much for coming on, Dan, and we thank you guys for watching. And again, man, if you want to get involved with that, go and to the website there for Bring Our Troops Home and sign up for that. Gary's throwing that up on the screen. You can see it one more time. Because anything you can do to be a part of something that's going to change something, we obviously encourage you to do that. And in fact, as I mentioned at the outset of this is like the first example of what we're showing, that people can make a difference. We say all the time that, hey, we're all in this together. And certainly we mean that as true as can be. We are in this together. And there's a lot of folks out there we think that can make a difference. And we're asking, you can see the email address right there on the screen there. We're calling, hey, we the people getting it done. And Dan is getting it done. And I bet there's other you out there that are also getting it done. Maybe there's other things going on. Maybe you're doing something. Maybe you've heard about something where somebody's actually doing something to make a difference. We want to expose that. We want to give people a place to come to see, hey, is all the bad things that are going on around the world and all the reasons to be discouraged about things. There's also stuff like this that we can be encouraged about. And we need to share that with each other so that we can see, hey, there are ways that you can make a difference. And even if it's a small thing, a middle-sized thing, something in your community, something in your state, whatever, do what you can with the influence you have and the power that you've been given, and share that with others. Send that to us. Send that to that email on there. We're going to keep talking about this in future episodes here. So put your thinking caps on and let us know, because we want to amplify what you're doing and give you a chance or give people a chance to see what you're doing, so that together, just like Dan said a second ago, all together we synergize that power. We can do a lot of things here, and we want to be a part of it with you. So, but that's all we have for you today. Come back again, actually just in about 20 minutes. We have show favorite Matt Ho is going to be talking about some things you're not going to want to miss. It's going to be live. Check back with us in 20 minutes, and we'll see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.